Hey, welcome to Griffin's Book Reviews. I'm Griffin, and this is the inaugural book review for my brand new YouTube channel. As I will mention frequently, I'm sure, on this channel, by the way, this is my cat, Zuko, one of my cats. I am in no way qualified to judge or criticize any other writer's work. I am just a guy who loves to read, who loves fantasy and sci-fi, and I love to talk about books. Mostly books that I like. If you happen to watch my first video on the channel, which was my tier list of every fantasy book and series I've ever read, you saw that I like most of what I read. I think there was one D and like 6 C's, and everything else was a B or an A or an S. So I like to think I've gotten pretty decent at knowing what books I'm going to enjoy before I actually read them. I haven't read that many books that I really don't like. So most of my reviews are probably going to be pretty positive. And that brings us to what I'm reviewing today, which is the Six of Crows duology by Leigh Bardugo. All right, so Six of Crows. Before I start talking about this series, I just want to talk about what I mean by spoiler-free review. I will be talking about basic info, broad strokes about the series. I will be talking about the main characters, the setting, the basic outline of the plot, but without getting into anything really specific, or certainly any of the twists and turns, anything that happens later in the book. So you really don't want to know anything about this book because you haven't read it. I understand. Probably don't want to watch this video, but I will always try to warn you guys if I am about to spoil anything significant, and I will try to keep my spoiler-free reviews pretty much free of spoilers. So that'll be my goal. And if I am spoiling too much for a spoiler-free review, please let me know, and I will adjust accordingly. All right, this truly shows how brand new I am at this. I'm editing this in because I filmed this whole review and realized, oh, I forgot to hold the books up or talk about what they're specifically called. So, yeah, first book, and forgive the mirror image issue. I know I got to figure out a different filming setup where it's not mirror imaging the titles. But so, first book is called Six of Crows, and the second book is called Crooked Kingdom. Okay, so Six of Crows. The Six of Crows duology is a best-selling, technically young adult series by Leigh Bardugo. It is a heist story. It takes place in the Grishaverse, which is Leigh Bardugo's world that also includes the Shadow and Bone trilogy, which you might know from its Netflix adaptation, which I have not seen, but I've heard is really good. And then there's also the King of Scars duology. Those all take place in the Grishaverse. The Grishaverse is mainly focused around people called Grisha. So the Grisha are people who are able to manipulate different types of matter. And the Grisha are split into a few different categories. The highest ranking are the Corporalki, who are able to manipulate the human body. And then there are the Etherealki, who can manipulate natural elements. And then there are the Materialki, who can manipulate solid matter like wood, glass, metal, even chemical compounds in some cases. So the Grisha kind of drive many elements of the stories in the Grishaverse. As far as I understand, I've only read the Six of Crows duology so far. But the universe is very much centered around these magical people with these abilities. The Grishaverse also features several different countries and cities that are inspired by real-life cultures and places. A few examples are Ravka, which is kind of the home of the Grisha or most of the Grisha, and it is inspired by Russia. And then there's Fjerda, which is inspired by several different Scandinavian countries. And then there is finally Kerch, which is kind of where most of this duology takes place, and it's inspired by both Amsterdam and the 18th century Dutch Republic. All right, and that brings us into the setting for the Six of Crows duology. So most of the story, no, not all of it, takes place in a city called Ketterdam, which is an island city and the capital of Kerch. It is a bustling Neapolitan hub for commerce and trade, but it also is known for having widespread corruption, a lot of crime. It's kind of the center of the criminal underworld in the Grishaverse. It is definitely less than savory in certain areas, especially in certain areas where a lot of this story takes place. So as for the main characters, and in this case, I'll be talking about 6 main characters. It is called Six of Crows for a reason. I think in most reviews I do going forward, especially spoiler-free reviews, I would think I'll usually only be highlighting maybe a couple or a few characters, depending on the story, of course. But in this case, I will give a little brief description of all 6. They are a diverse group of teenagers / young adults. I heard something recently about, I think these books were reprinted with the ages of the main characters moved up a little so that they're young adults as opposed to teenagers, which I don't know a whole lot about exactly why. I guess it comes down to that the characters seem older than they supposedly are in a lot of cases. In any case, most of these characters are outcasts. They are generally struggling to survive and just trying to stay afloat. Most of them live in a section of Ketterdam called the Barrel, which is a particularly shady part of Ketterdam. It is filled with brothels and gambling dens and just other sketchy types of places. And it's also run by the many gangs of Ketterdam. They kind of have free reign in the Barrel. It's that sort of place. And that's where most of our main characters start their story. All right, so let's get into our main characters here in the Six of Crows duology. So it is definitely an ensemble cast. I would say there are 6 main characters for sure. But if there was one character who is truly the lead of the story, it is a young man named Kaz Brecker. He is the leader of a gang in the Barrel. His gang is called the Dregs. He is known for being very cold and calculating and ruthless. He has a mysterious past, even to his friends and his gang. He always wears gloves that he seems to never take off, which has gotten him the nickname Dirty Hands. And he's also he's very much a schemer and a planner, and he will do whatever it takes to stay ahead and survive. He's a really fascinating character. His arc and learning more about his story is one of my favorite parts about Six of Crows. But I will get to that later when I'm talking about the things I love about this series. Okay, so next is a character named Inej, and she is a member of the Dregs gang. She kind of serves as Kaz's right hand, and she is the spider for the gang, which essentially means that she has the job of spying for Kaz, gathering information, following people around. She is very sneaky. She is also very agile and even acrobatic, and she's so good at being the spider that she has earned the nickname the Wraith, and she's kind of a legend in the Barrel. I don't want to get too far into her or any other characters' backstories, but she previously worked in a brothel, kind of under duress, working under a very cruel madam who ran the brothel. And she got out of that situation, but she's very traumatized by it. She kind of has a fear that's always lingering of having to be brought back into that life, and that kind of is part of what drives her. Another thing that drives her is she has a real desire just to be free of all of it, to be free of the Barrel and the gang lifestyle. So that's a big part of her character. She also has a really fascinating relationship with Kaz. Like I mentioned, there are a lot of really interesting dynamics between different characters, which is one really, really cool, interesting thing about this story. Then there's Jesper, who is the sharpshooter of the Dregs gang, and he's very skilled with a gun. And his guns are his prized possessions. He really loves his guns. Jesper had more humble beginnings. He was raised mostly by his father on a farm, and his father believes that he is in Ketterdam, in a much nicer part of town, studying at the university. But unfortunately, Jesper has a pretty nasty gambling habit, and he kind of has compiling gambling debts that are really constantly weighing him down, and they are a big part of why he is stuck in the barrel, having to be part of a gang and live this less than ideal lifestyle. Okay, then there is Nina. She is our first Grisha that I'm going to talk about, and the only one I'm going to talk about in this video, to be honest. She is a very powerful Grisha. She's a type of Grisha known as a heart render, which means she can both manipulate people's emotions and their actual physical bodies. She can literally stop a man's heart just in the blink of an eye. So you can see how she's very powerful. At the beginning of the story, she is working in a brothel, and she gets recruited by Kaz and the dregs for a big heist, a big score. And as for her history, she was actually, okay, minor spoiler here, maybe skip ahead 20 seconds if you don't want to hear a minor spoiler about her backstory, but she was trained by the Ravka military, kind of in a past life, you might say, to be a soldier and to use her Grisha powers to be a soldier. But fate kind of pulled her out of that life and brought her to Kerch. Next, we have Wylan Van Eck, who is the runaway son of a rich merchant in Ketterdam. But he also happens to be a genius, especially when it comes to demolitions and chemical reactions, and these are kinds of things that can come in handy when you're part of a gang in Kerch. So he is very useful. He is a very shy, uncertain character, does not have a lot of confidence, but as you might expect, he kind of grows, and he and the gang warm to each other, and he also warms to himself, you might say. And then finally, we have Matthias. He is from the country of Firda, which is inspired by Scandinavia. And he was originally something called a Drusko in Firda, which is basically a soldier, but specifically a soldier trained to hunt Grishas. In Firda, Grishas are believed to be essentially abominations that need to be eradicated. It's kind of that black and white for them. He has also a very complicated history with Nina, as you might imagine, as she is a Grisha. And their relationship is one of the most fascinating in the story as well. He is very rigid. He's very much guided by his principles and his prejudices. You could say he's brainwashed, but his character has a lot of growing to do at the beginning of the story, and he has another really fascinating arc. So those are our 6 main characters. Truthfully, all 6 of them are morally gray characters. They're also all exceptionally skilled in their own way, and they also are all kind of broken in their own way. They all have unique but significant trauma that they've been through, and those different aspects of them all drive the story in their own way. All right, so let's get into the plot of Six of Crows, and just very much broad strokes, not going to spoil anything significant. But so at the beginning of the story, Kaz, who is essentially the leader of the Dregs gang, is offered a big job, a big heist, an extremely dangerous heist, but also potentially an extremely lucrative heist. But it is a job that requires a large crew and a diverse crew and a very skilled crew. So that is kind of the propelling incident of the story. And I will just say that neither Kaz nor the other members of his gang can really know or understand the wide-reaching implications of this job on both the Grishas of the world and just all of this world in general. So the duology, it follows the events of this job and them trying to pull it off, and kind of the aftermath and just the many ups and downs, twists and turns for Kaz and his little gang. And they try desperately to just survive and to stay one step ahead of their enemies, which may include, vengeful merchants of Ketterdam, rival gangs in the Barrel, even maybe hostile militaries. So it really is a story of their fight for survival in a very, very broad sense. All right, so those are kind of the basic details of the Six of Crows duology by Leigh Bardugo. So now I just want to talk about the things that I really enjoyed about the series. First and foremost, as I've kind of mentioned and alluded to, the characters are great. It is a very diverse cast of characters. I find all 6 of the main characters and several of the side characters as well to be very compelling. Each of them is unique. We get to see a lot of their backstories and their origins, and I think that those sections of these books are written really well. And they sometimes, when you're reading a story that kind of detours from the main plot to go into a character's backstory, it can slow things down. It can kind of take you out of it, at least in my experience. But that's not the case in these books. I find the backstory sections really fascinating. And also, as I mentioned, the different dynamics. You could almost say that any pairing of the 6 characters, there is some interesting dynamic there between them, and interesting relationships. And I really enjoyed reading about those and seeing how those evolve throughout the story, and kind of guessing where they were going to go and where these relationships were going to end up. Although it does have a great plot and an exciting plot, the characters in this series are too good for me to not call it a character-driven series. They're great characters. And speaking of the plot is another thing I really enjoyed about the story. It is consistently fast-paced. It really is. I mean, I guess any good heist story, you want it to be full of twists and turns, but this series is really, really packed to the brim with twists and turns. You really, at least I was really not able to guess where it was going. You kind of always have the feeling that there's something going on that you don't quite understand or you haven't figured out yet. And you're kind of always trying to figure out what Kaz is up to and what the plan is. And I found that really, really captivating. It made it really hard for me to put this book down. It was a classic one more chapter before bed type of story for me. I loved the fact that it was a heist story as well. I mean, I think a good heist story is always fun if it's executed well, and this one is. So it's just, that type of plot, when done right, is just always fun for me. So I enjoyed that. I had a feeling I would enjoy that going in. I liked the fact that so many of the characters are morally gray. In this story, there are certainly protagonists and antagonists. You could say there are good guys and bad guys, but you can definitely also say that the good guys, you love them, but they are never really pure. They've got their flaws and they do some questionable things, and they have to make some difficult choices. And as for the bad guys, the antagonists, like you can understand where they're coming from. You can sympathize to a degree. Maybe not with all of them. There's maybe one exception to that, and you'll probably know who I'm talking about if you read it, but not going to spoil it. But yeah, they really are morally gray, which makes it feel more real in a sense, especially in a place like Kirch and the Barrel. It would be hard to be a purely good person living in a place like that and trying to survive in a place like that. So yeah, I thought Leigh Bardugo did a really good job of writing her characters. And beyond the characters and plot, which I think are my favorite things about the story, it also had a pretty in-depth world building. There are only a certain number of places that the story really visits, but in those places, Leigh Bardugo gets very in-depth, and we learn quite a bit about those places. And they're really interesting, and it's interesting to think about the parallels between these fictional places and the real-world places and cultures that have inspired them. So yeah, it really, if there are 3 kind of big things that you look for in a fictional story, if it's characters, plot, and world building, I think that all three are done well in the Six of Crows duology. To different degrees, I really do think the characters are the unquestionable highlight of this series, but the world building and the plot are also quite good. It's just a really well executed series all around, in my opinion. Okay, now for things I didn't love about this series, and there aren't a lot. This is probably going to be the most difficult section of my reviews most of the time, because as I mentioned, I like most of the books I read, and that is especially true about this series. I really enjoyed it, so I had to really dig deep into my mind and even do some research to find out what other people had found not great about this series, just to like spark something. So take these with a grain of salt, because they're minor gripes. The only thing I will say is that at times the world building can maybe get a little more into detail than what's really needed, and those are the only times that the plot and the pacing maybe drag just a little bit. It's not often. It's maybe one or two instances throughout the book, or throughout this whole series, honestly. So that's a very minor issue. And the only other thing is that there are maybe a couple times in the story where the protagonists have a little bit of extra plot armor, where they survive situations or pull things off that kind of stretch the boundaries of, realism. But it's a fantasy book, so I don't go into it necessarily hoping for realism. Yes, if a character is just inexplicably invincible, that can take me out of a story, but that wasn't the case in these books. There are just a couple times when you're like, really? That worked out for him? You got away with that? But it didn't bother me a lot. I got over it real quick when it happened. So yeah, those are my only gripes. I really don't have any significant complaints about this series. All right, so in all of my reviews, I want to have a section near the end of the video about who I would recommend this series to specifically. In this case, with Six of Crows, I would recommend it to really anyone who likes dark, gritty fantasy with morally great characters. Definitely anyone who enjoys a good heist story. And as far as other books that you may have read that are somewhat similar to Six of Crows duology, at least in terms of kind of overall vibe or feel, certainly the number one I would say is Lies of Locke Lamora. That's probably my favorite heist story of all time. But the Six of Crows duology scratched an itch for me that I have not been able to scratch since I read Lies of Locke Lamora. It's definitely right up there in terms of great heist stories. Mistborn, it's got some similarities too, in terms of just kind of the young street gang sort of vibe, and a little bit the Shades of Magic trilogy by V.E. Schwab. I would say if you enjoy any or all of those books, there's a pretty damn good chance you're going to like Six of Crows. All right, and the final section of all of my reviews and my inaugural YouTube book review. Thank you for getting to this point, by the way. If you're still watching, I do really appreciate it. My final verdict, and I'm going to rate every book or series I review on a scale of 1 to 10, because what can I say? We're humans. We like to rate things. We like to assign a number or a letter grade to things. It tickles our brain in that good way. So my final verdict is definitely that I thoroughly enjoyed this series. I absolutely loved it. One of my favorite things I read in 2025. And as for its rating, I will give Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo an 8.5 out of 10. So that's it. That's the end of my first YouTube book review. I am hoping that I am here for a long time and can build a cool little community of people who love fantasy and sci-fi and literature in general. And yeah, I really look forward to talking to some of you, hopefully, and having fun conversations about a lot of awesome books. If you want to like and subscribe, I would, of course, greatly appreciate it. I'm going to be honest, I truly never thought I would be someone who's talking into a mic and looking at my phone and saying like and subscribe, but here we are. And I don't mind it, to be honest. And yeah, please let me know in the comments what you thought of these two books. If you loved them, I'd love to hear from you. If you hated them and you completely disagree with everything I said, still love to hear from you. Like I said, I am not particularly qualified. I'm just a guy who likes to talk about books. And I loved these, but doesn't mean everyone does. So yeah, let me know what you thought. Let me know what books you're looking forward to reading, or what books you are most excited about, or what the best book you've read so far in 2026 is. Please feel free to comment anything you like, except for hateful things. I mean, if you want to say you hate me, that's fine. Just don't, no like hate speech or anything, please. But yeah, anyway, Six of Crows, Leigh Bardugo, 8.5 out of 10. Really awesome duology. I'm really excited to read more of her stuff. And yeah, thank you so much for watching, and have a great rest of your day.